Welcome back along to the Car Chronicles podcast. This is episode number 73, and it was supposed to come out a very, very long time ago. This episode is all about the BCSG bait book, which caused a big stir, I think it's fair to say, in the bait world. Obviously, bait has been discussed and many things have been written about bait within the BCSG, but for them to come out with a book penned by the members of the BCSG, I just think it's quite a big deal, and lots of people were very eager to get their hands on that book. Now, I recorded this episode with Paul back when it very first came out. In fact, I don't even think it had come out. I think it was on pre-order, or perhaps it had just come out. And anyway, the idea was we were going to record the episode and then put it out there to help promote the book and also give people that buy the book a bit of a kind of behind the scenes look at what exactly went on with the book and all the lengths that Paul went to make this happen. Me just being overrun with work, it didn't happen, and apologies once again to you, Paul. Terrible form on my behalf. Really am sorry, mate. But yeah, anyway, long story short, this episode didn't get published, but it is now being published now that the book is sold out. It's sold out pretty quick anyway. They certainly didn't need my help selling it, but unfortunately it is no longer available. But we thought, you know what, let's put this podcast out anyway. It will give people that have bought the book a bit of a kind of behind the scenes look at it as well. And obviously people that didn't get their hands on the book can still, listen and learn about it a little bit. So this episode is about the book, which is now sold out. And I think it's well worth listening to. We've also recorded, I say we, I mean me and Paul, we've recorded another episode which is about Paul's own kind of life experience in the bait world. His dad ran a established bait firm. Anyway, I'll save all that for the next episode. That will be coming out fairly soon, hopefully. It won't take as long as this one's taken. So yes, anyway, before we jump into the episode, I'll just quickly say optibaits.com. Mentally busy as always. I just can't understand how we keep getting more and more customers and busier. I don't do any marketing. I don't do any catch reports. I literally just mention it on these podcasts and it's just word of mouth, to be honest, and it is snowballing out of control. But anyway, definitely keeps me busy and mostly out of trouble. Anyway, we have a spring sale on. I've never done a spring sale before, but I thought this year, why not? Let's just make things even more stressful and busy. So the spring sale is live. There is 10% off of literally everything on the website. And I actually realised, going off on a tangent here, there are a few products which with 10% off, I basically do not make any profit whatsoever. Some of them I make a bit more, some of them I make a bit less on. I know most businesses have like a flat rate across the board, but if I did that, it would mean some things are just too expensive to be bought, and it's not all about the money, is it? It's nice having products out there. Blah, 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 blah. So anyway, the spring sale is on. You can grab yourself a bargain at optibaits.com. That is OPTI baits.com. That's it for the intro. I hope you enjoy this episode with Paul Martin about the wonderful BCSG book, which, by the way, it's sold out, but you can actually buy it on eBay. I've just had a look, and there's copies up there for around about £90. So that's an expensive book, isn't it? But it is wonderful. I have a copy. Paul very kindly sent me one. I can't say I've read it all or anything, but the bits that I've looked through and skimmed through really do look very, very, very good. So kudos to and well done to all of those people that have contributed, and of course, well done to Paul for putting together a mammoth task and making it turn out into the success that it is. Anyway, that's enough of my waffle. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Paul Martin. Paul, welcome along to the podcast. You have taken 2 painstaking years to pull together some of the best bait brains in the business to create this book. How did it all come about?
Hello, mate. Yeah, it's been a long process. Two years since getting the idea sort of shared with a group of friends, but it's something I've been kicking about for a long time. I mean, I know that guys like yourself, like me, like all the members of your bait club as well, they're the sorts of people who will meticulously go over all the old publications, looking for grains of information. You'd buy a magazine because it had one guy that was into his bait in it, things like that. And what always occurred to me is that there's a massive interest in bait, not just boilies, the fermentation of particles, all kinds of stuff. But there's a massive interest in it that hadn't really properly been catered to beyond a couple of token efforts where you'd get sort of well-known anglers who would write about their favourite colour pop-up and those sorts of things that for guys like us, that's just not anywhere near the sort of level of information and insight that we're looking to get.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my primary idea was to just kind of go through almost the greatest hits of all the guys that I'd love to really sit in a room with and pick their brains. Obviously, there's people like Rod and Fred Wilton, and the two sort of real originators of boilies and of real advances in bait. And the book, the BCSG book, is dedicated to both of those guys. I was really, really hoping that we'd get to sit in a room with Fred because he still has lots of friends who are in the BCSG. I was really, really hoping we'd be able to sit in a room with him and just say, what do you think now? It's 40, 50 years since you first wrote about boilies, and Towards the Ultimate Bait was his article. And I was really hoping we could sit down in a room and say, how do you feel now? Have your views changed? What do you make of the monster that you created?
Yeah.
And just really get something down on paper, because a lot of these guys, they're in their 70s and 80s, some of them, and people like Rod, they've gone already, and it's just such a shame to miss some of the information and to let it just disappear. So there was a real sense for me of trying to get some of that down on paper. Some of it is, absolutely wedged with history, walks down memory lane, talking about Horton Kirby and where the Herrig started, and all these other places that are in folklore, but as well as relatively modern information as well, coming right up to the present day. So it really dips into a real wide range of subjects. You've got a copy, Sam. What's your first impression of it?
My very first impression was it is a beautifully looking book. The cover it's gorgeous. It's very well made. It's very well put together. And you were very decent in getting it to me, I think, within a day's notice, which is phenomenal. But I still haven't obviously had time to read the whole thing. But skimming through and just looking at the lineup, just the lineup on its own is very impressive. And, obviously I have no experience of doing what you've done, but just getting someone to do a podcast getting them in at the right time, all that's hard enough. So I can only imagine how hard it was to pull it all together. I think you did a very good job on that. But yeah, I think just to go back to what you said a little bit, you wanting to capture the ideas of these people, and you're absolutely right. And on one hand, I think carp bait is still in its infancy. Haven't been going that long. But on the other hand, there does come to a point where it's all very much the same thing, that you're seeing from others and that you're finding yourself. And I think it's only when you really dive deep with people that perhaps look at things differently to yourself, and therefore find different findings than yourself that you can really learn when you get to a certain point, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think this book is going to be a huge factor in people taking their bait knowledge and bait making up to the next level. And I genuinely mean that as well, not just blowing smoke.
I mean, there's almost there were a few sort of primary ideas that were going around in my head. One was to try and educate people on understanding what they're buying a little more than they do already. I mean, we talk about human food and all the rest of it, and you should buy processed food, and you shouldn't buy this, and you shouldn't eat this, and the world is full of news outlets telling us what we should and shouldn't eat and drink, and even most people have a fundamental grasp of what a diet should contain, but yet all the carp anglers I know, well, I say all the carp anglers, there's a good chunk of carp anglers that I bump into and I meet. I run a fishery. I do fish day ticket lakes from time to time, and when you bump into these guys, they literally have no idea what goes into a boilie.
Yeah,
they wouldn't even know where to start. They'd say, "Well, there's flavour in it," and then beyond that, but there's probably some preservatives in it, and then beyond that, the knowledge is really limited. They don't understand how the quality of the product is dictated by the machinery it's rolled on, by the availability of products at a price that allow you to meet a price point, allow a retailer to meet a price point, and that everything is dictated. The quality of the product is totally dictated by the price you can sell it for, not by how effective it is as a carp bait. So that's a bit of a wake-up call, I think, for lots of people. They think this is probably the best bait you can possibly buy if it's in a shop, or if it's in a bag, or if it's somebody who's been selling the bait for years. But it's. I'm not saying that they're poor products. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is that what you can sell it for is the first thing that dictates how the bait is put together. And and there are elements of that outlined within the book. I've got a chapter in the book that talks to you about how you can make the bait, make your own baits, some basic recipes. We've got a range of recipes in there actually as well, so people just lifting things off the page and start and experiment with, but also to try and understand how if you increase one ingredient, it's going to have this impact on it, or if you increase your solubles, for example, it's going to make your bait stickier to roll, and little things like that you might, just to give you a more of an insight into if you did want to dip your toe in the water, because it really is difficult, isn't it? If you don't know anything about it, you get some eggs, you get a few powders, you throw them together, and it will blow your mind to begin with.
I think it's quite daunting for people these days, isn't it? I mean, it's a dying art, rolling your own bait, although I do think it's making a little bit of a comeback, but maybe I see a skewed kind of demographic on that.
I think you do, mate.
Yeah, but I mean, you're right, because the first bait I rolled, it was just semolina and some flavors from Tesco, or my mum's cupboard, actually. So, the barrier was... The barrier was low. Do you know what I mean? I just wanged it together and didn't think twice. But now in this age of media, you just flick online and how do I make a carp bait? And you could be hit with many different things. And it must be daunting. So I think the fact you've got some recipes for people to start with and then, potentially make their own, tweak and things like that, which people love to do. I think that's brilliant. I think there needs to be more of that out there.
I think the thing is, as well, is a lot of the information that's out there in the world comes from people, and I say this with great respect because I know that you sell products as well, Sam. So I say this with the greatest respect to everybody involved. But a lot of the information out there is skewed to describe a situation that is beneficial to their business, and I'm not.
100%.
I'm not saying everybody is just lying to you to get your money, but what I'm saying is that there's a lot of, I'll use one example. If John Baker says a bottle of flavour that's over a year old, you shouldn't use it. I'm paraphrasing here. I know he didn't say it as simple as that, but if somebody says something like that, the first thing that anybody that's got any experience of handling food knows is it's not about how old it is; it's how you've looked after it.
Yeah.
I
agree.
This is the thing: if you've had a bottle of Scopex in your cupboard for 10 years and it's been kept in the dark, it hasn't ever been opened, and then you get one that's been on a windowsill for 2 years, I know which one I'd rather be using.
Yeah, that if you keep a Scopex or many of the cream type flavors, if you keep them well and how they should be kept, they'll actually get better with age. They actually mature into it.
Yeah, Gary Bay said the same to me. So one in a past life, I've been sort of a bake consultant I say consultant, not, one of those guys that gets a relatively finished product and we just do the fine tuning. I've been with quite a few firms, so I've sat down with quite a lot of guys like Mark McKenna, like Gary Bays, like Keith Sykes, lots of these sorts of people, and you just have these conversations. And Gary said to me, if anyone wants to return their Scopex to me because it's 5 years old, I'll give them a litre for every 100ml bottle that they've got. You know what I mean? It's better. It's absolutely better. He says it goes I think he said it goes an orange or a brown or something, and it just darkens off, and it's an even more potent flavour.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, a lot of the cream ones are the same as well. It's not just Scopex. But then, to be fair, there are others which definitely deteriorate. And you don't know how someone's going to keep it and blah, 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 blah. But I mean, you could keep a flavour for 10 years and keep it in the worst way possible. As you say, windowsill in a crappy, plastic type bottle. It's still going to have some attractive elements, maybe, if it's a good flavour in the first place, so it's not that all is lost. But I will say with flavours, I think it's very easy to get hung up on the old classics that, proven and brilliant. But the food technology at the moment and flavour technology is so much further than it ever has been. And I think really now is, in a way, more of an exciting time than it once was. And I think there's some future classics yet to come out that will, blow previous things out of the water. I truly believe that. And as I said earlier, in some ways, we're still in our infancy with carp bait. I mean, if you look at human nutrition, how many years has that been studied? And in how much more depth than carp? So much more. And we're still finding out new things, Yeah. It wasn't that long ago. Every health expert would have said, yes, spinach is brilliant. And many of them still will. But we're now more aware of things like oxalates, which are present in there, which could cause people serious issues. So we're always learning and evolving, and that's on a topic that is studied so much more than carp ever will be. So yeah, I think now is the most exciting time there's ever been in terms of carp bait. You could argue that, but yeah, I don't think it's all lost. I don't think it's all doom and gloom. That's for sure. I think too much rose tint is going on with older baits, if I'm honest.
I think the voices in the industry are all of a certain age and they remember a different time, and I think that's what's driving a lot of the narrative. But that said, I do think that there are products that that were available back then that were head and shoulders above a lot of what's available now. They're just lost to time, and you have to forget them, move on, find a new classic, and not just go, oh well, I'll just keep compromising the original product to try and include something that gives us a hint of that. It's almost, I'm sure most of these guys that buy bottles of flavour, they put them on the windowsill and they just sniff them once a week and just go, oh, that smells great. And they don't actually use it in their bait. I think a lot of guys are just buying them for, smell is such an evocative thing, isn't it? It's nostalgia, like it brings back so many memories, and I love it. I mean, I'll often disappear into the garage, and I'm sure you've got you've probably got a unit or something, but I'll disappear in the garage and the missus will say to me, you've been in there, you've been smelling flavours again, haven't you? I'll stink.
Yeah, I constantly stink, unfortunately. But yeah, and I'm the same, every now and then I'll open up an old bottle of whatever and smell it, and it takes you back. But we're always talking about, people are always smelling, like, it fascinates me. If I give someone a flavour, they come to my unit, they'll open it up, everyone smells it. No one's tasting flavours. It's called a flavour. Yes, the aroma is important, but the difference between a good flavor and a great flavor is in the taste, in my opinion. That's oversimplifying it a little bit, but no one's tasting flavors. I don't know why.
No. One of my favourites is Baker's banana. Tastes amazing. It tastes
Really?
like old foam banana sweets.
Yeah.
And you just go, oh, the smell and the taste are perfect. They just go, and a little drop of Scopex with it or something like that. It's just another level. Just before we leave the subject of flavours, another one that I found did deteriorate really quite quickly was caproic acid. I don't know if you found that.
No, I mean, it's quite a stable thing because of the pH of it, obviously. But I mean, this is something I've mentioned before. But if you're buying it from a carp retailer, you don't know how old that product is by the time it gets in your hand. And there is a lot of bulk buying going on. And people will happily have a product sitting on a shelf 5-6 years with shitloads of air in the container, and not think twice about it. And I think that is a real factor, not just with flavors, but with all kind of things, really.
Yeah, I must admit that I may have got an old batch then, because I wasn't impressed with it. Let's put it that way. I was tinkering with it in some quite pokey pop-ups, and I wasn't that impressed with it.
I mean, yeah. I mean, general opinion is it's not as stinky as MBA, and it probably isn't, but I kind of think it is. But then I bottle up it, I sell it. But it comes with a 5-year, I think it's 5-year shelf life on it, and I probably buy about 4 batches a year, something like that. I'm like that with all my things, although obviously it'll be cheaper to bulk buy it. It's that freshness aspect of it. But I'm sure it's about 4 or 5 years. I think butyric acid is the same, or maybe even longer. So maybe you had some real old stuff.
I probably did. I probably acquired it in a batch of bits and bobs from somebody, because I have a habit of doing that.
Right.
Finding things like a guy's like getting rid of his rolling tables because he's not rolled in 20 years. And you just unearth all these old gems, like an old like Nutribates caviar flavour, or a Hutchie regular sense appeal, or a secret agent, or something like that. And for small batches, as long as they've been kept pretty well. I mean, I've very happily used flavours like that in pop-ups or singles. But I possibly did get the caproic the same way. So
yeah, Nutribates had some lovely bits. Their guava, I really, really like their guava, but all of the bottles of guava I've got hold of recently within the last year, they've all completely deteriorated. They're just no way near the same. Because really I'd like to get it analysed and copy it and bring it out, because that was a superb flavour. Yeah. But that is one of the others that just seems to really deteriorate. Obviously, if anyone's got any out there, it's been kept well, then please let me know. I'll buy it off you. But it's hard to get good stuff. You broke up a little bit, but I think it was my end. As I said, I got new Wi-Fi bedding in issues. Were you going on to say something else there when I overtalked you?
No, it's fine, mate. It's fine. We were. I was just thinking that I wouldn't want a potential buyer of the book to think that we're talking about the science necessarily behind flavours. We have a great chat by Dieter and Gio from Forgotten Flavours, where they talk about the lengths that they've gone to replicate some flavours, some of the old classic Hutchie ones, and also some brand new ones. But we've also got lots of other parts to the book that are not boilie specific, because I think that is the trap that a lot of people will fall into. They'll go, bait, what's that, boilies, is it? But it isn't just boilies. What I decided quite early was, I thought that there's 3 ways to look at bait. There's the history of it, there's the theory of it, so there's something more scientific side. So, a bit more of the nuts and the bolts and why things work and what you might want to consider when putting a bait together. There's application and then there's production. So I split them down into those sort of 4 core areas. But what I'll do is, if that's okay, I'll just go through a couple of the bits that in each section that I think people will really enjoy. So,
yeah, of course.
So in the history section, we've got Tim Paisley talking at length around some of his early experimentations with bait. We've got Bill Cotton going sort of more behind the scenes to the early days. So some sort of proper sort of this is what we did right at the very beginning discussion. Sean Jarvis has done a great chapter on all the different flavours that Rod was sending him. So like the original Autumn Harvest, all of those Nouvelle Fizz, loads of those sort of old classics, what he was doing. Compound TF was another one I know he did well on. Gary Bays does a great chapter really going back in time. So until Scopex Squid, I think will always go down as probably one of the most classic of baits, of boilies that's been produced. And Gary talks about how he got to the point with using previous baits as examples. So he talked about previous baits like the Monster Pursuit and others around that time. He talks about what was in them, what seemed to make them more effective and less effective. When he was putting the Scopex Squid together, those things that he wanted to pull through and use, and the things that he steered clear of, because as you can imagine, continuity is a massive challenge for big bait producers, being able to consistently get hold of the same product. And I know that he had a particularly effective beef liquid and that he was using in his Monster Pursuit, and that became unavailable, and it just knocked the stuffing out of the bait. So it was basically dead. Really, you couldn't really replace it. So he talks about some of that stuff. A long interview with Jeff Bowers talking about the fish meal revolution. So how he started, the impact it had on his own fishing in Kent, and then forwards, and to basically building probably what was one of the biggest bait empires going at the time. It's probably in the sort of the 90s, that sort of era, into the early 2000s. We've got some people in the theory section. You won't be surprised to see a few familiar names to Carp Chronicles listeners. People like Dean Towie, Steve White and Jason Ryder.
Yeah.
So I know all 3 of those guys have been on, and James Noel as well around carp vision. I think all 4 of those have been on your podcast, haven't they?
They have, mate. Yeah, they have.
We also have a great interview with Pete Boughton, or Pete B, as he was known on the internet. He's always a controversial character, like to stir the pot. He was in quite reflective mood and he wasn't quite as difficult to deal with. I'm not sure that's quite the right way of putting it, but he was. Let's just say we got lots of honesty out of him, and it was really we've got it all down on paper, and I think that's really useful, because some of his work on enzymes and some of the work that he's done on just making really simple baits that are really, really effective. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learnt there for the amateur bait maker.
He'd be a good guest, actually.
He would. He's now living in Thailand, I believe, but I'm sure they've got the internet out there. So another really interesting one is in the theory section is the influence of moon and tide. Now, the BCSG, the S stands for study. There is an element of scientific nature to some of the things that have been written by the group and the research that's been done. And we have a venue in the Colne Valley called Hindles, and every capture from that lake over a prolonged period, it was recorded against moon phases and basically we've used that as the basis of a data set to make a proper scientific, well, I say proper, but it's a scientific investigation really into the effect of the moon and tide against.
Sorry, Paul. Go on.
You're fine. No, you're fine.
Is that has the exact data been published in the book, or is it just a kind of summary of your findings?
There are graphs and charts to outline when the most effective parts of the month are. There are limitations, obviously, because it's what we don't know is how many rod hours were put in against any of those captures. So we don't know if there's 20 guys there on a full moon and three come out, but the day before only two, there was one guy. So it's as scientific as you can make a non-scientific hobby, if you know what I mean. But it does show. I mean, Richard, the guy that's pulled it together for the book, he does show. It does. His conclusion is there's not a tremendous amount of statistic variation, but I think when you look at it, you can still see that there are times of the month when it is better to be fishing than not, and his focus on the tide as well seemed to give you further information that kind of make you go, if those two things are in alignment, the weather's perfect. We've got a low pressure system coming in. You know what I mean? You'd put all those bits together, I think, and go, do you know what? That is useful. I'm going to get out there and chances are you'll be successful.
It's just interesting to know it, regardless of all that, isn't it? Have they gone as far as actually different moon phases being more effective at certain times of the year, or anything like that?
Not so much at different times of the year. I think the thing is it's not super scientific, because the main thing that we have to bear in mind is that people from all walks of life need to be able to read it. Digest it. And if we started getting too into the weeds, I was slightly concerned we'd end up with something that only people that handle data for a living would really be able to get their head around. And there's probably 70 or 80-year-old guys who've worked in a factory their whole life, and they're going to read this, and they're going to hope they should still be able to understand what we're saying. But what I didn't want to do is get too in the weeds. Plus, I'm not sure the data set is rich enough really to really go to drill down into. So that there's some of the highlights from the first half of the book. We've got John Pack, who I'm sure many of you will have heard of. John, he's talked about bait application on circuit waters. So he's caught heather, he's caught loads of fantastic carp over the years. He caught two-tone from Conningbrook at a British record it was either December or January, or it was horrifically cold weather. So he's one of these guys that is consistently done it at a very high level, and he talks about how he approaches spot fishing, bait application. It's not just boilies, it talks about hemp, and there's some really useful little nuggets there around hemp, things that he's noticed about hemp, that if you're buying hemp particularly to cook yourself, things that would be helpful to keep in mind. There's a good few chapters as well around particle use. We don't really talk about tiger nuts, surprisingly. We talk about lots of the other favourites. Maples being the one that the old boys really kind of single out as being a real one of note. An old friend of mine, Danny Keane from Essex, who some people will know, he did a fantastic chapter on using baiting poles, because there is an art to it, and there's a few tricks that he's developed that he's used to catch fish up to upper 40s from quite difficult lakes, and he gives them all away, which I think is good. A little bit on the method. An interview with Paul Forward, who obviously passed away a couple of years ago, but he did a lovely interview with carp. What's it called? Not Carp TV. What they became.
Carp Fix, is it? No.
No, it's
no. I know what you mean.
It's Elliot Gray's.
What's it called? I know what you mean. CYP. It is.
Yeah, Sipography.
Sipography. That's it. Sipography. Yeah. I don't know why I didn't know that.
I was saying it. But Paul Ford did a great interview there, talking about how he developed the solar club mix, how he used it, how it was applied, some of the things he did on the Hearts Club water. He talks about that. So we've we've effectively stolen that off of them. Well, I say stolen. They gave us permission, but we've taken it off of them and put it in the book. We talk about single hook bait fishing, zig fishing, ready-made baits. Gavin Neal from Handcraft Hook Baits has done a chapter on creating effective hook baits. Two I think that really stand out for me. One is a very detailed conversation with Mark McKenna about his time with Baitcraft, how he developed some of his products, some of the lengths he went to get great products, some of the challenges that he had in continuing to produce those products, and basically how the business really ended up coming to an end. So that's quite a long story, but I think it's one worth sharing because his baits were they were the best for a period of time. They knocked everything into the shade for a period of time.
I agree with you. The T1 did, yeah.
Oh, it's a phenomenal bait. And one that's slightly surprise some, I think, is the chapter we've got on pellets, on carp pellets, with a guy called Steve White. So not the same Steve White who's been a guest on your podcast a couple of times, but a different Steve White, who is the distributor for Ala Aqua pellets. He's been to the factories, he's seen the production methods, and what I've done is I've gone through the production methods with him, so we have a bit better an understanding of how the pellet is made, the sorts of products that they're trying to include, and he also, because he comes from a fish farming and fishery management background, he also talks about some of the elements of preference that are shown by carp, and the impact on and the I'm going to get this wrong. I'm going to say food conversion ratio, or FCR they might call it. So as fish get older, what they can utilise and what they can't, and I think it just makes for really interesting reading. So it's like that old myth of I'm going to do a real heavy duty fish meal with a load of GLM in it and a load of milks in it, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and that's going to catch me the old ones. And his view is that actually that's not where you need to go. They don't have those big old fish don't have that same requirement for protein and such a heavy diet. They're actually very happy on a lighter, almost vegetable-based diet, which I think it almost flies in the face of a lot of homemade bait makers, their kind of feelings on that sort of stuff.
I think there's a lot of variables there, isn't there? What is best for them and what they would thrive off is often different to what they actually want to eat in the moment. Yeah. And obviously the environment that they're in, are there any deficiencies that the older ones are going to potentially be better at seeking out that might be held within a more rich bait? I think there's real potential for that there. But, not obviously not discrediting what the guy is saying. I'm not saying
absolutely.
that at all. Not at all. But yeah, there's always so many variables with things, isn't there? But when we kind of question our own findings and views, that's the only time we really learn, And I think pretty much anyone can teach anyone something about bait if they've been making it for a while. I think there's a lot we can learn from each other. Did you say he had, or his company or a company had conducted studies on this? Is this?
Yeah. So Alarak was they're probably one of the three biggest pellet suppliers in the country, but on the continent they are massive. They are absolutely enormous, and they've got units and factories and production and testing systems all over the place, and everything that is in their pellet is scrutinised to within an inch of its life.
Oh yeah.
And it has to have real value before it gets included. And we know that palatability of pellets, I think, this is something I've said to a few friends when they've asked me about the book. I said, if you think about what are the top 5 baits for carp, top 10 baits for carp, boilie might not even make it into the top 5. Even the very best boilie might not make it into the top 5. you'd say, well, most in terms of most attractive, you'd probably say you'd be hard pushed to beat worms or maggots or hemp or peanuts or tigers, all of which probably appeal in a more instant way. But pellet would have to be up in that list, even though that's a produced product, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, I love pellets. I think they're superb. I tell you what, I've always done better on trout pellets than I have carp pellets. which I find very interesting, and it sort of makes me question some of the research that some of these companies do.
Well, yeah, but I think what you're seeing there is that you know how we talked about just a second ago. Context is king. The variables.
Yeah.
If you're turning up and you're chucking out a PVA bag of trouties, then absolutely you'll get more bites on that than you will on a standard carp pellet. But if you're feeding carp on
of course.
You've got problems, haven't you?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I get it.
So, So they're looking at a slightly different application, but I would have absolutely no. If I was somebody that was using lots of pellet in my fishing, I probably wouldn't be using a carp pellet. I just wouldn't be. I'd probably be looking at halibuts or trouties. They're.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I use them. Obviously, I make all kinds of bait. I use trout pellets in the edge stalking. Yeah, phenomenal bait, and yeah, like you rightly say, it's up there with one of the best. I think a good trout pellet, although they are very different these days. The old Scretins are a world apart from what they offer now, but it's just the way of the world, I guess.
Leaving the old greasy slick on the floor of the garage when you pick the pellet up, but.
Oh yeah, I used to just stuff my pockets full of them, and you just have oil all over your trousers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're still oily, but not quite the same. They used to be mega oily. But yeah, anyway, sorry, I'm taking you off course there.
You're fine. You're fine. So there's loads of great chapters. There's like if you're a fan of listening to the older stories, you've got Robin Dix, who lots of people know. He talks about the various particles that he used and the evolution of some of those. If you really want to get into making your own boilies, then I've got a pretty big chapter on how you might want to make your baits individual. Good friend Kevin Willisey, he's done a great chapter on what the functionality of certain types of ingredients are, how they interact together, and some recommendations on levels you might want to include. So if you do want to get into making your own baits, or if you think that you might want to step up a little bit and have a bit more of a go at something more complex, then there is loads of that sort of information. Mark McKenna's chapter will tell you a lot about what goes into an absolute top end bait as well. He doesn't give you a specific recipe, but I was able to encourage him to give us percentages of certain types of product. So for those of you that you've put together baits in the past, you'll read it and you'll go, I know within a few degrees of certainty exactly what was in that bait, and we'll be able to. You won't be able to replicate it because there's two products that are missing. Well, actually, three products. So the proper old L0, that's not available. Yeah. That's we all cry about that one.
Yeah, I agree on that.
There's a milk protein that, out of respect to Mark, he did tell me what it was, but he didn't put it in the interview. There's an old milk protein. You might be able to guess what it is. Others might guess what it is.
Got a good idea.
Yeah, he felt that even though it was in at a relatively low level, he felt that was a really important part of his bait. And the two fish meal products that went in, you can't get them anymore. So the original fish meal that he had in there was he was getting something that was totally unique, a single species capelin meal from direct from a producer in I think it was Norway. I might have that wrong. And he also had one of the very first soluble fish proteins as well. The powdered, I think it was Sopropesh he was using back then. But I think that was the first. But the product that he was using was being made out of one factory, and as he says in his chapter, he says, a hand of God. Basically, there was an earthquake, the factory fell down, and they stopped producing it, and that was the end of their soluble fish protein. So it was there were those three or four things that really that were absolute top end, absolute creme de la creme and made that bait. Well, there were other things as well, such as the flavours and the oils and other things, but those ingredients were the spine of the bait, and eventually he didn't have access to a good chunk of that.
Yeah, this is what we're up against as well, consumers of product and people that make bait, whether that's to sell or to roll ourselves at home. Products do come and pass, and it is a real issue. It's a real issue. But it's just the nature of the beast. And some of the very best products out there, they are made by, perhaps slightly smaller outfits that aren't quite as market stable. And it just comes with the territory, unfortunately. But there's a lot of, whilst you kind of said earlier, you rightly pointed out, just because a bait is in all the shops doesn't mean it's the best bait. I completely agree with you. It's very cost driven, but there are some of us that are smaller outfitters that really do put quality first. And yeah, I think you're going to see some baits go because the products that are available to us, they're just changing. There's some great ones coming in. Don't get me wrong. Some fantastic stuff coming in, but there's also some real good stuff going out, or whether it's hard to get in the UK or whether it's ceased being produced, whatever it might be. This kind of things are definitely changing. But that is the nature of the beast, isn't it?
Yeah. We're such a small part of a very big machine, aren't we? And we're right at the bottom of the food production chain. And we're fighting for the scraps of what's left in production processes. My view on some of this stuff is you might contradict what others think, but I look at products like the hydrolyzed fish liquids, and I just look at those and I think, are they of value? I think you probably need to be super picky in what you use, but are they of the sort of value that is being described to those that have got like particularly some of the really cheap acid produced stuff that you have to look at what raw materials are being used in their production. And what they're doing is they're applying acid to bones and scales and absolutely nothing that
shells
absolutely nothing the fish would be interested in reality. And they're making something that is what I would term as partially attractive to a carp. They're ticking one or two little boxes. The same for some of the soluble fish powders. Now they're coming from that same background. I would much rather ignore both of those products and get hold of a high quality fish meal that is from a whole fish, and just ignore that acid treated stuff totally. I just don't. If you think, I think you're a little bit younger than me, Sam. That's not to diminish your experience, but I don't know how old you were when the Premier fish meals came out. The fish meals that we were using back then, they were so rough and ready, but the carp so in love with them. The cooking process was not a factor in what the carp felt about the fish meal. It was not a factor. It had enough of the stuff that they loved. And my concern is that these days a lot of the products are processed within an inch of their life.
Yeah.
The conversations you had recently with Marcus, where he's producing some of his own meals, that's exactly the route I would go down if I was in a position to produce 200-300 kilos of bait a year. And I was going all the time. That's exactly the route I would go down. Produce from raw fish.
Careful what you wish for. I'm doing it, and it's a fucking nightmare. They're expensive as well, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can imagine. Yeah, but
Sorry. Yeah, was that the all of the parts that you wanted to cover there? You wanted to cover the 4 parts.
Yeah, I think we've covered most of what's in the book. There's in the book. Sorry, there's a lot of other chapters, and there's some lovely reflective stuff. There's some Gary Dennis talks about when he used to work for Rod, some of the tricks he pulled. So because he wasn't always a stand-up guy giving loads of positive advice. There are times he could be a little bit of a rogue, and that gets covered. I think that's a polite way of putting it. It could be a bit of a rogue at times. We've got Charlie Daly, who's a noted scientist, works for. I possibly shouldn't say who he works for actually, because he works for government. But he's a very clever man. Looks at different products that he's used successfully to attract carp to parts of a lake. Not using pheromones or hormones or anything like that, but using natural things to bait areas with that don't include bait or traditional baits. There's a few nice campaign stories as well.
So sorry to interject. Does he mention them in the book, or is he keeping them to himself?
No, he keeps them to himself. But I think he gives enough of information to get people's brains working.
Gotcha.
That's quite a BCSG thing, to be perfectly honest. We don't always want to spell everything out, but you want to set you on a path of getting the grey matter moving. Mick Cutler writes something quite interesting about how you might get round fake maggot bans. So if you're on a lake with no pest fish and maggots is working really well for you. They came up with him and his friend came up with a way of using pork rind, and it was taken on flavour. They were using it and it was taken on flavours, and it was actually more effective than the fake bait. And you can use it to cut it into all different shapes, so like fake corn, fake meat, fake luncheon meat, all kinds of stuff, and super tough. And the fish absolutely love it. They've caught no end of big carp and other species on it as well, which is a bit of an unusual story. I think when you read it, it's quite
It's a new one to me. Never heard of that.
Yeah, just thinking what other. But we've got. There's a lot. So there's loads. There's about 45 chapters. So I think I've probably touched on a dozen to 15 there. It's a massive book, as you can see. It took me 2 years. I think the work that's gone into it it was a phenomenal amount of work that went into it, and I think that you can see it when you hold the product in your hand. And we went with Stephen Harper, who many of you will know who've bought books in the past. You will know that his books they're all fantastic. There's no shortcuts. Pardon me. So
no, the reason I asked if you'd cover those four things you wanted to, I was going to interject with a question. Obviously, it's quite some feat. All these different authors. What surprised you most during the process of making this book become a reality?
How unreliable carp anglers are.
I'm with you.
I mean, it was difficult. I think I started with 55 people. I knew some would fall away. I knew some would, but there were some that I'm just absolutely devastated to not having within. I think it was the chairman of the BCSG said to me, "Oh well, you'll just have to do volume 2 when they arrive, won't you?" And there's not a chance after the amount of work it's taken me to do this one. But the things that surprised me the most, I think, probably how quickly we've forgotten the lessons we learned in the early parts of the particle revolution, particularly the variety of baits that people like Hutchie was writing about in the old magazine, papers. Because there weren't mags back then, but maple peas is just, I've been feeding my fish in my own lake on them this year in conjunction with pellet, just to see what their reaction to it, and it's been hands down better than pellet. They just absolutely hands down. They will just go for it first every time.
Yeah, they're like mini boilies as well. I love them.
They are. The fish go nuts for them, and if you haven't got any pest fish in your lake and there's no particle ban, they're ever so easy to produce. Just soak them up and for 24, 36 hours, something like that. Bring them to the boil, use them the very next day, ideally, when they're nice and fresh. And even just like 10 mil micro boilies on the hair, or you can even, if you've got like a very fine needle or a drill, you can even put them on the hair. But the fish, absolutely, it just reminds you that of those old, how effective like simple sugars are as an attractor to carp, and the organic nature of some of the products that, when we put them in a boilie, they get processed within an inch of their life. But yet some of those old particles they're like crack. They just cannot get enough of them. Peanuts are the same, aren't they? But probably not quite as rounded a food as a maple. But I think just it reminded me of things that I'd long forgotten, and it reminded me of the journey that I've been on myself, going through some of the different baits that I've used over the years, the lessons I've had to learn the hard way, the amount of bait that never made it even into the freezer, the amount of one egg mixes that ended up in the freezer and just written off as just being terrible. Making bait is such a long journey. If you want to immerse yourself in it, it's a hobby. It's as big a hobby as carp fishing, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
So I think it helped me remind me about a lot of the things that I'd forgotten, about a lot of the old stuff, that just because it's old tech, it doesn't mean it won't be just as effective now.
Yeah. I mean, you've obviously read everyone's contribution.
Yeah, probably about 10 times.
Numerous times, yeah, I bet. What, if you had any kind of jaw-dropping moments, as in, have you read anything, like, the information about bait that's really kind of struck a chord with you?
I think Pete Boughton's interview, I think, was really interesting. The simplicity that he viewed a lot of the challenges with. We're all guilty, aren't we? We go. There's a learning cycle with bait, isn't there? You're consciously incompetent at the beginning, and as you get further in, you think that the more that you learn, the more complex you can make the bait, and it will make it more effective. And that everybody I've ever had conversations with around bait have always gone on that journey.
Yeah.
And ultimately, those that stick with it, they come out the other side and they realise those three products, they're not really, they're all doing similar things.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you come back and you go, actually, I've trimmed this right back. I only need 6 or 7 ingredients to make the most effective bait that really I can within the budget that I've got. I'm going to include one primary sort of soluble powdered attractor. I'm going to include a couple of different liquids, stuff like an essential oil and a flavour maybe, and I've ticked pretty much the boxes I think I can from an attraction point of view. And you just bring it right back, and you go, and you kind of realise that there's a level of competency to that is, it shows you've kind of reached a good degree of being a really solid bait maker.
I agree with you. Yeah. I agree with you, and it's bringing it back to synergy, isn't it? You're better off having a few good ingredients working synergistically than.
Yeah.
I mean, some of I get sent recipes all the time,
yeah,
and so they're like 30 odd ingredients in there.
It's nuts.
Yeah, I'm not exaggerating either. Yeah, and then obviously it comes a point where it's detrimental to be adding these other things, especially to your bank balance as well, because it's not all cheap, is it?
No. So, I mean, I give an example in my introduction of one of the reasons I think bait and your understanding of bait is so important, and that I had a situation on a lake where it was a strange lake in the sense that it was quite deep, didn't really have any margins, it was really sheer margins, and it was a sand pit, and I'd never fished a sand pit before, and probably haven't done since either, but it had a very low stock, but a very high volume of water for its size. It was like 20 foot all over pretty much. So I was thinking, right, I need something that's quite pokey, because the fish are all in the top third of the water. I need to bring them down in the bottom 2/3 and ideally onto the lake bed. So I'm going to use something quite pokey. And I was using a bait that I'd used successfully elsewhere. And I was over the top of it, I was using some pineapple and embutyric pop-ups. Now, some people say you mustn't use neat flavours. You must use them at a fraction of a mil and all that. So people like John Baker, that's very much his view. But I found, and a number of others as well, my friend Dave Gawthorne is the same, I go in really high on some pop-ups. I'll put 2-3 mil of neat flavour, half a mil to a mil even of embutyric over the top in a tub, shake them up and put them on the windowsill to absorb into the pop-ups. And they've been very effective when used as single hook baits. But on this particular lake, in this deep water, there seemed to be something about the flavour was streaming out, and I was getting so many shows right over my baits, but no pickups. And so obviously you reflect, you retreat into your bivvy, and then into the dark recesses of your brain, and go, my God, why have I'm fishing? I've got these fish showing over my baits, and I can't get a pickup. And you go, okay, so maybe there's too much flavour in there. And then I was reminded by a friend of in one of Rod's first books, there's a scale of repulsion on flavours. He's got like a bait and then these sort of echoes going off the bait.
Yeah.
The flavour's too strong. And on that particular lake, that is exactly what it proved to be. I literally went home, made some pop-ups that had, to one egg, it had 1/4 mil of plum flavour, John's plum. He makes fantastic flavours, doesn't he? 1/4 mil of plum, 1 drop of embutyric, and that was it. Went back the next session, I had 2. Right, I'd done 30 blank nights, or at least upper 20s blank nights on this lake, and then I've had 2 in a night on these brand new hook baits.
Yeah.
And it just told me everything I needed to know. Is you have to pay attention to what you're doing, and the same trick doesn't work on every lake.
No, it's very much horses for courses, isn't it? Yeah, very much so. That is fishing in general, not just bait, though. That stems to all aspects of angling, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
That's one of the things with buying a bait off the shelf where you're at a disadvantage, is because what you've got a bait that's had to have been dialed down to be an everywhere bait.
Mm.
Whereas I'm not suggesting everybody needs to go out and buy all the basic ingredients and make their own. Even if you buy a ready-made mix, you will find that there are things that you can do that will be helpful on particular venues. Like whether it's I talk about where you've got a lot of bird life, for example. If you're baiting up at dark and there's any bait left at dawn, you're just covered in moorhen and coot. You can make really soluble baits that it's just dust on the bottom by the morning.
Yeah.
But you've got that flexibility if you want to do it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, this book, it kind of strikes me as there's something for everyone in there, which I guess it was intentional to some degree. Yeah. But I mean, I would say it's probably very much more for the intermediate or more advanced bait maker. Would you agree?
To be honest, so the history section, which is 1/4 of the book, roughly, there's no science in there. It's about what the guys did in the years gone by, some of the lessons they've learned.
Right.
I mean, there's any carp angler would enjoy that first chapter, regardless of whether they've got a strong interest in bait. In a number of the chapters, the bait is the jumping off point for a wider conversation. So particularly like in the bait application part, there's like Bill Cotton's doesn't spend a lot of time in that section talking about what's in individual bait within the baits that he's made, but he talks about the 2 or 3 products that he ramped up or reduced to increase the attraction, where he decided to put them on the lake bed, and the effect that baiting pattern that he'd implemented was having. So there's science in there. There's a lot of stuff. If you want to roll up your sleeves and have a go, there's plenty of stuff in there for that. but there's still a lot that I think if you're a carp angler, you've got interest in bait, haven't you? Because it's what's on your hook. But
Should have, yeah.
Yeah, we should have, yeah. But I would say other than a small percentage of carp anglers who are either beginners and just are not worried at all about bait, or those that just go on an occasional basis and just get whatever's on the shelf and has been selling the most. Almost everyone else who's a proper carp angler, a serious carp angler, I'm sure they'll find half a dozen, 10 chapters in there.
Yeah, so it is very much for everyone.
I believe so, yeah.
I need to read it. I need to read it. I tell you this, though, I can honestly say it is a beautiful book, and it's a book that you want to have on, well, maybe on your coffee table. But if not on your coffee table, certainly on your bookshelf. It's just a beautiful thing to hold, isn't it? And, just looking through the contents, all the different contributors, I just know it's going to be a great book. And I know you worked really, really hard on it. We've been going for a while. I know we're on somewhat of a time constraint. We haven't spoken about any of your own bait experiences or angling to any great degree. I know you're well experienced in making your own bait, and perhaps you deserve an episode of your own another time. But just to kind of round things off, what else, is there anything else you'd like to say about the book or making bait in general? Any other kind of message you want to get out there to the listener?
I think just take a deeper interest in the products that you're using to try and attract carp onto your hook. Take a deeper interest in it. You don't have to become as obsessive as people like you and I, Sam. That's not required. That's just in our nature to become absolute geeks on the subject. Yeah. But to understand a little bit more about what's inside it, if you go to a tackle shop and you buy a bag of bait, if you look on the back, you'll get some idea of the level of, or the type of products that are in that bag of bait. Now you'll look at that and you'll go, okay, there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of the stuff that I would like to include in a bait within it. Then you go down, then you're then able to either choose from the variety that's in the shop and make a more informed choice. So you might think, actually, for example, if you're using it, if you're fishing a lake that's got a lot of bream in it, I wouldn't want to be using something that's got a high fish meal content in it. But it's not always obvious as on the outside of a bag as to what's got a high fish meal content and what doesn't. So taking more of an interest in the product itself, read what's on the back. If it's high in soya, high in bread products or bakery products, or you'll get an understanding of what's in that product, and it should inform you as to how you might want to apply that bait. I would quite happily take a number of off-the-shelf baits and I'd apply them in volume, but there are others that I probably wouldn't want to. So just start to understand what's in the products that you're using, and if you're fishing in a lake where some guys are doing particularly well on a product, on an off-the-shelf bait, or even if it's not from a tackle shop but from a producer, find out what's in it. Try and build an understanding of the things that carp seem to enjoy, because it isn't the monster crab flavour, or it isn't the Scopex flavour. That's a small part of it, but there are a lot of other things going on in that bait that if you'll then become better informed. You'll maybe approach a local bait maker and you say, I'm looking for something that's got these things in common, and then he'll probably put you onto a bait that you'll absolutely love and catch loads of fish on.
Yeah. Wise words indeed. Paul, thanks ever so much. Where can people grab this book? And they definitely should.
So it's available from Stephen Harper Publishing. So if you just literally type in BCSG book, carp book, or bait book, type any of those sorts of things into, or book 8, because it's the 8th book that the BCSG have done. If you type any of those things into Google, you'll get there. But they're available from Stephen Harper. The book is, I think, considering its size, because it's the biggest book Stephen's ever done, it's well over 400 pages, and it's £40 for the book, which, if you're buying somebody else's, like it's bigger than Terry's book, bigger than Daryl's books, there's so much information in there. I think it's a great bargain.
Yeah, it's a lovely coffee table type book, and it's something that you don't have to read it from, front to back. You can just pick in, can't you? I would imagine anyway. You just pick
Oh
in
yeah,
whatever chapter sort of takes your fancy at the moment. So
yeah,
yeah, it's certainly, if you're making your own bait or interested in better bait, I think it's a must have, and I mean that as well. Yeah, awesome stuff. So just Google BCSG carp bait book, and it'll come up with it.
yeah, yeah. It's Stephen Harper Publishing is where you're going to find them. Where you're going to find them.
They've got a website, have they? I presume.
They have, yeah, yeah. It's only available from that one place, so
Right.
yeah. But any of the search words will get you there, I'm sure.
Brilliant. Awesome stuff. Paul, thanks ever so much for your time.
No worries. Thanks for having me on and letting me talk about it in depth.
My pleasure.